Welcome to the Prepped and Polished podcast, the podcast that empowers you to take control of your education, featuring weekly interviews with influencers in the world of education, as well as tutoring tips, lessons, and updates. And now, here's your host, Alexis Avila.
And welcome back to the Prepped and Polished podcast. This is episode 140, and I'm Alexis Avila, your host. Be sure to join our community. You can find us on SoundCloud, Facebook, Twitter, Google+, Instagram, YouTube. Just type Prepped and Polished. You'll get there. And go to preppedandpolished.com for more info and sign up for our free ACT essay course on the front page of our website. Also, I got to start doing this more. I'm going to plug the website a little bit, preppedandpolished.com. And if you need tutoring, you can reach us at 781-753-9951 or email us at info@preppedandpolished.com. Have a question or reaction during or after the podcast, submit your question to radio@preppedandpolished.com. Let's get to today's guest. Today on episode 140, I'm talking to Dr. Delvina Miremadi, who is founder and chief resilience officer at Realize Your Resilience, a company dedicated to helping individuals, groups, and organizations build upon their strengths and foster resilience so they can grow, succeed, and thrive. Dr. Miremadi completed her doctorate in educational leadership at Simmons College, focusing her research on academic resilience and higher education. On today's episode, Delvina shares ways teens can develop the mental tools to overcome any life challenge that comes their way, and she teaches us some amazing things like how to follow the 50-40-10 rule. So let's get right to our guest. This is episode number 140 with Dr. Delvina Miremadi of Realize Your Resilience. Delvina, thanks for joining us today on the Prepped and Polished podcast. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Can you start off by sharing with us your background a little bit and focus on a few pivotal moments that lead you to where you are today as founder of Realize Your Resilience LLC?
Sure. Thank you again for having me. And I just want to, start by saying I'm really excited to connect with your audience. And thank you for all the great work you do at Prepped and Polished and reaching out to students and really helping them. For me, I guess I'll just begin by talking a little bit about my personal experience as one of the pivotal moments for me, in that I really am kind of a true believer that everything happens for a reason, and feel that part of the reason I'm so passionate about resilience and really driven to help others stems from my own personal struggles, both as an adolescent and young adult, and that kind of growing up for me, I had difficulties with kind of low self-esteem, low self-efficacy. I was really afraid of failure, and all of those things really weighed in to my academic journey and my transition into college. And what ended up happening for me is, I think like many students, I had this really great protective mechanism where I was able to kind of put off to the world that everything was going well. I was doing well academically. I was involved in sports and athletics. But this kind of internal piece of me, this internal dialogue, I was doubting myself a lot. I was kind of my own biggest, my harshest critic, or my own worst enemy. And that piece was happening inside that really nobody could see. And so why I'm sharing that as a pivotal moment, because that really led to, during my transition to college, when I kind of all the support systems faded away and I was on my own, that became a really difficult piece for me. And what ended up happening was I reached out, and I think seeking help will look different for everybody depending on who they are and what they're looking for. And for me, it was a variety of things. I reached out to family and friends. I really got big into psychology and started reading a lot of books, and I also sought professional help from various wellness professionals. And it was this part of kind of this eye-opening experience that, like, really understanding the power of the mind, and that the benefit of how changing your thinking can really impact just your overall quality of life. And I really started understanding, and something that I teach in Realize Your Resilience is thinking about the mind like a muscle, like the way that you work out at the gym to improve kind of your physical and, to feel stronger and healthier physically. You really need to kind of do the same things for your mind and not just expect it, you just have this mind and it just happens, life just happens, and you just have to be at the mercy of whatever's going on in your mind or how you're feeling emotionally, that we're actually in the driver's seat, and that, we can use our mind to determine how we want to think about the world, how we want to feel. So that was one really personal kind of pivotal moment. And then professionally, I went on at that point, I took a position at Children's Hospital Boston and was working with the Strengths for Depression Prevention Initiative. And I worked there alongside a psychologist for about 5 years, and we were going out into communities, educating high school students, high school, middle school staff. We worked a lot with parents, and, by the name of the program, we were preventing depression. But we were really, what that meant was we were really thinking creatively, educating, and trying to build resilience within the community, within the individual parents, within the students. And so that was another kind of pivotal moment for me to realize, one, working kind of on this global scale or this universal approach to making change was going to become something I really wanted to do. And then also the resilience piece that, on the other side of the spectrum of the study of, psychology and what's wrong with people, there's this whole other area that's so important. It's within the field of positive psychology, and resilience lives in there of, there's this whole world of building skills and what's right with people, and how do we kind of study that and understand that and try to integrate that into everybody's kind of life. And then the last piece, I guess, to answer that question is, most recently I became a mother, and I have 2 young boys, a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. And this is kind of, added this new dimension to really wanting to inspire and help people live a more resilient life. I think because I now, I look at them and I know I'm not going to be able to prevent adversity or prevent bad things happening in the world around them, and that I can't protect them from all of that. But what I can do is really try to fill them up, fill them with all the good stuff, all the protective coping skills, the confidence, the self-esteem, and all of those things. So when they do face it, they're better equipped to kind of figure out how to manage and negotiate their way through it, and come out in a more positive place because of it.
It's amazing. Amazing work that you're doing. Could you tell us a little bit about your services from your website, Realize Your Resilience, and what we'll find there?
Sure. So kind of one piece of the business, and really a core piece of it, is the one-on-one coaching. And so what I try to do is combine all of the research-based concepts that I've been studying and also, been working on with other people, to really create some, engaging, easily digestible tools that, people can apply to wherever it is in their life, whatever they're coming to me with. And, the coaching model is very, you're the expert in your life, and we're kind of a team, and you're in the driver's seat, and I'm really just here to help guide you in a direction that's going to get you to reach your goals, maybe a little more direct route, or with less stress or adversity along the way. Another piece of that, I guess, to mention, especially for your audience, is that because of my work, my experience, and my education, I do specialize in adolescent and young adults and really helping them through different transitions. The transition to college is a big one, but also other transitions where that coaching piece can really be helpful. And then, all other individuals. So if you just are, in your 30s and you're looking for a change of careers, or, if you're a new mom and maybe trying to navigate regaining that balance or sense of self. So coaching can be and specifically resilience coaching can be a really valuable tool at that point. I also, as part of Realize Your Resilience, do educational workshops, webinars, presentations. I have developed a toolkit that is available for colleges and universities, and that's really to help the university themselves figure out how can they integrate resilience concepts into kind of their programming and efforts on campus. And I recently developed a self-paced e-learning course, so that isn't out yet, but is in progress. And then there's also a resilience success assessment that we validated and will be out for publication soon. And so that's really just helping, measure strengths within an individual and identify kind of where they are on the, within these various resilience concepts, and kind of where could they put their effort in to really help bolster their resilience. And then the last piece is really just the consultation. It's a little less defined because it really is about, whether you're an educational consultant or a small nonprofit or a big corporation. It's thinking about how can resilience be integrated into what you do, how can we partner together to kind of meet your needs, and figure out, how resilience fits to either, improve productivity, help, transition through a big change, increase motivation, whatever it may be.
Wow, you got a lot going on. It's hard to believe that you were once someone who struggled with self-efficacy issues. Got about 1,000 projects going on, so kudos. Let's talk about the parents a little bit. What are some things that parents can do to help their child develop a better resilience for themselves?
So I think, as parents, we want to kind of do everything for our children. We want to protect them, and so I guess I'll start with a message that thinking about your child, and particularly them as students, is giving them some room to kind of navigate situations and be there to support them, but don't kind of immediately step in to rescue them. That they do have within them kind of these innate coping skills, and that they'll be able to find their way with your support through that, and that learning process is really going to be helpful for them to kind of experience that. Another piece of that is kind of the message that we're sending them. So, we talk about there's kind of two areas of having mindset, and one is a fixed mindset and the other is a growth mindset. And so it's kind of learning. So fixed mindset is like this idea that we are who we are. Our minds are we're kind of born in this certain range of intelligence, and that it's not really, it's, inherited. It's not changeable. Whereas a growth mindset is that, our minds can grow and change, and that we are capable of all of this with, effort and time and learning. And so, for example, within this idea of mindset, there's a psychologist, Dr. Carol Dweck out of Stanford University, and she sends this message just in the sense of talking to your kids about school. And so she would say something like, a fixed mindset would be you're saying to your child, not everybody's good at math, just do your best, right? You're just, so, and you're thinking you're saying the right thing, but actually a more helpful way to to talk to your child might be to say, well, when you learn to do this new kind of math problem, your mind's going to grow. And so continue, to learn a new problem and another new problem. And so just that small shift creates this different way for the student to look at or approach this area in their life. Another one, if you catch the student saying, I'm not a math person. I used to say that to myself. I'm just not a math person. Help them kind of look at it and say, well, you might not be a math person yet, right? But just add the word yet to it, so that there's this idea that it might not be the way you want it right now, but there are ways to, continue to grow that part of your mind. It's just going to take some effort and some time, and it's possible because the science tells us our brains are set in the growth mindset way, right? So the more we do, the more we learn, the more neural pathways are developed, and that's kind of the way that life is. So those are a couple, and I could probably go on, but I won't. We can come back to it, I guess, if there's time at the end.
Well, we'll have you back on the show.
There we go.
Yeah. What are some things that come to your mind when you think about parents who really drop the ball? We kind of already talked about it, but is there anything like it that comes to your mind where parents just like obviously do something wrong, where it's kind of a concern and it could lead to like poor self-resilience?
I think that's a interesting, valuable question. I'm sure it's a question that parents are asking themselves all the time. As a parent, you're thinking, am I doing this right? I don't want to mess up my kid. Am I supporting them the way that I should be, or am I doing the wrong thing? So I guess the best way to answer that question is just to reframe the question, and rather than thinking about parenting or supporting your child, or even for your own life, it's less about what you need to avoid doing and more about asking a question of what can you do? What can you do to continue to help them develop and grow and foster their resilience? Because we can all become more resilient. So even a child who's really successful and doing really well, there are always things that can be doing. And so I think for parents, it takes a lot of pressure off, right? Like, don't focus on what you need to avoid, what you are going to do wrong. If you're focused on, what are the things that you can do right? And so, I talk about there's a lot of things that can be learned, certainly through, compassion and gratitude and mindfulness and all of these elements that kind of help parents be in the moment, to listen to their child, to listen in a way that's really helpful, and be able to kind of set that path to integrate more resilience in just kind of the everyday, but staying positive and trying not to get kind of tied into that negative, because I'm sure you're a great parent, and especially a great parent if you can stay positive and keep moving forward in a direction that's going to lead your kid moving forward too.
Awesome. Any tips that come to your mind for teens who get bullied in school? Just ways to kind of cope, things that they can say to themselves.
Yeah, bullying is such a difficult situation, I think, for everybody involved, those observing it, the bullies themselves, those being bullied. I think the first most important thing I would say is to reach out. You have to not deal with this on your own, to find a trusted adult that you can talk to. And I know that's not always easy, even to just find the words of how to say it, but that really is, I think, the most important piece. There is a book. It's self-published by a 16-year-old girl called The Survival Guide to Bullying, and it's really wonderful in that she wrote this book because she felt like she could have used it when she was experiencing bullying. And so she talks about different ways to communicate or reach out to parents or teachers tips on how to, conquer your fears and her experience. And so I think that's helpful. On a more universal level, there's, I think important for all of us to understand, and there's a lot of research, that I'm sure everyone's aware, with the bullying, really starts with and continues through insecurity and lack of psychological support and low self-esteem. And so, thinking about ways that we can integrate more education and support for both the bullies and those being bullied. Skills like leadership and empathy and compassion and mindfulness, the research really does support that really helps increase self-esteem and self-efficacy and decrease insecurities, and it helps diminish the incidence of bullying. So, just thinking about some of the skills we can integrate in, again, that positive, rather than trying to stop bullying by focusing on the bullying itself, what can we do in a positive direction that by circumstance is going to help kind of diminish that incidence of bullying?
That's great. And do you have any advice for any teens who might be listening to us today, in fact, who appears on the surface to have it all, but is really internally feeling stressed, anxious inside, and hides it on a day-to-day basis?
So there's, I guess a few things. And right off the bat, I think, just be kind to yourself. There's, I talked in the beginning about my experience with kind of that negative thinking and that negative self-talk, and it really can be kind of detrimental to your journey through your education, but then also, in life in general. And so if you ever hear yourself saying, I can't do this today, or, I can't do anything right, I'll never be good at math, right, for example, I always mess things up, no one likes me, it's kind of that never always failure. That's like the negative mind chatter in your mind that you really need to pay attention to first. So recognition is really the first step. And then find ways to replace it with more positive thoughts. So think, I love this analogy or this tool to help replace the negative thinking. So I always say, think about, it could be a little toddler baby that maybe you babysit for, maybe it's a younger sibling, a cousin, but imagine this young child who's going through life, they're learning new things all the time, but they're learning through experience, just like we are every day. And, they may be trying to walk and they fall down. They may be trying to put a toy on top of another toy and stack blocks and it falls down. Or they're trying to get a piece of food in their mouth and they just can't seem to do it. And the frustration. And now imagine saying to that child those things that you say to yourself. Like, you can't do anything right. You're never going to be good at that. You're always messing things up. So what I like to do is think about that, right? And it's horrible. It's horrible, but it's horrible to say it to yourself too. You deserve the same amount of kind of compassion and respect and patience and kindness, right? You deserve to talk to yourself that way, the same way you would speak to that young child. And so if you hear that voice coming into your head, try to think of that child and then think about what would be something you could say to them, right? What would be something else, something encouraging, something positive, how would you? You would most likely come up with something kind and positive to say. And I guess another piece that I would say is just don't be afraid of failure. In order to be successful, in order to be happy, you really need to put yourself out there, believe in what you're doing, and not be afraid to make mistakes, because actually the science, it tells us that our brains are specifically wired to learn from our mistakes. So we actually learn faster and we learn more when we learn through the mistakes that we make. And so it's okay, it's okay to take that risk and just appreciate and learn from the various things that are going to happen in your life that might not work out exactly the way you had expected them to, and that those are opportunities to grow and opportunities to learn and really kind of keep moving forward in a positive direction.
That's wonderful. So teenage years is an exciting time, overwhelming in one's life. To any teen listening to us today, any words of wisdom before they cross the bridge to young adulthood?
Words of wisdom. Let's see. I mean, I guess believe in yourself, believe in your abilities. I had just mentioned be kind to yourself and don't be afraid of failure, but I think kind of approaching life believing, you are in control. And I talked about mindset, and so when you can believe that your mind and you have kind of control over your behavior, your outlook, your overall mental attitude, and that you can set that in a positive direction, then that's really going to be, I think, helpful not only to overcome difficulties, but also to go on thriving. So a big piece of resilience for the Realize Your Resilience, our model, it's kind of twofold. It's not just about bouncing back. It's about thriving. And so, we want to kind of continue to learn, continue to fill our lives with positive things. And by doing so, when we face adversity, we don't just come back to where we started. We come back way far beyond that because we're now full of all these skills. And so, believe that you can do it and make an effort on a daily basis to do something that's going to increase your resilience. And there's a lot of ways that you can figure out what those are going to be for you. But I think making that effort, it's a conscious decision. There's not to ramble, but there's it's called the 50-40-10 rule. It's this idea that I think, 40% of what we do and our happiness is determined by intentional activities. And 10% is kind of circumstance, so how much money you have, where you live, which is really small. You'd think that would be bigger. And 50% is genetics. But 40% of our happiness is determined by what we do every day. And so I would just say focus on that 40% and really try to fill your life with things that are moving you in kind of a positive, thriving direction, and it's going to bring a lot more happiness.
Wow, that's amazing. Delvina, thanks a lot for coming on the show, Prepped and Polished Podcast, and hope you can come back, and appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
And this wraps up our show today. This was episode number 140 with Dr. Delvina Miremadi of Realize Your Resilience. To connect with Delvina and access her coaching services, check out her website, realizeyourresilience.com. I hope you enjoyed episode number 140 with Delvina Miremadi of Realize Your Resilience. Tune in soon to hear our next podcast episode, number 141. It will be our next tutoring tips episode. And to access today's episode 140 and all of our podcast episodes, head over to preppedandpolished.com/podcast, or you can go to SoundCloud, soundcloud.com/preppedandpolished. Thank you for joining us on the Prepped and Polished podcast. Now go out there and take control of your education.
You've been listening to the Prepped and Polished podcast. For more information, check out preppedandpolished.com. Also, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening. Class dismissed.